Looking for something different than your typical destination ski resort? Utah's Powder Mountain aims to fit the bill. The resort offers an upside-down layout, significant restrictions on daily lift ticket sales, and an advertised 8,464-acre footprint, creating a stark contrast from most competing mountains nearby. With other destination ski resorts attracting more and more crowds over the past few years, Powder Mountain has piqued a lot of interest from those looking to recapture an uncrowded ski resort experience. However, the ski area was recently taken over by Netflix co-founder Reed Hastings, and he plans some very significant changes to the resort in the coming seasons. So how does Powder Mountain stack up? Well, in this video, we'll go through Powder Mountain's overall experience as it exists today, and then we'll go through how the resort stacks up in our overall rankings. We'll also go through exactly what Powder Mountain's new ownership has in store for the resort starting in the fall of this year, and we'll detail both the positive and surprisingly negative consequences of these changes. Let's jump in. Let's start with Powder Mountain's layout. The resort's top-down shape gives it a different vibe than every other destination ski resort in the United States, with the base area sitting at the top of the mountain rather than the bottom. This circumstance makes for an uncharacteristically built-up upper mountain, but surprisingly isolated lower mountain areas. While the setup might take some time to get used to, most guests will still find the resort to look incredible, with vast swaths of large, rolling peaks surrounding the resort. With a top lift-served elevation of just 8,900 feet as of March 2024, Powder Mountain sits a lot lower than most of its Utah competitors, and it tops out only a few hundred feet above where mountains such as Alta and Brighton start. However, this lower elevation makes Powder Mountain a better choice for those who are susceptible to altitude sickness, since even though the resort sits well above sea level, it's easier to adjust to the elevation change than at most of its competitors. With this all being said, since the resort's base does sit at the top of the mountain, the lower elevation benefits won't translate as much to those who are staying directly on site. Powder Mountain advertises an 8,464-acre footprint, which, if correct, would make it the largest ski resort in all of North America. However, this metric comes with numerous asterisks. 3,200 acres of this so-called skiable terrain is reserved for guided tours, meaning access to it doesn't actually come with a Powder Mountain lift ticket. In addition, Powder Mountain is much wider than it is tall, and its 2,200-foot lift-served vertical drop is not impressive as far as Rockies destinations go. Across its 5,200 acres of true inbounds terrain, Powder Mountain is hurt by the lack of a coherent lift system. At least as of the 2023-24 season, only 56% of this acreage is lift served. The rest is only served by paid Snowcat rides, bus served, or in rare cases, hike only. This makes more than half of Powder Mountain's terrain extremely impractical to get to. The resort currently has one high-speed quad serving the hidden lake pod, but the rest are slow, fixed-grit lifts. Under the current resort setup, the mountain's sundown zone is notably removed from the rest of the resort. Although it's possible to ski from sundown to other mountain pods, getting to this area warrants a ride on a public bus, which is a lot to ask for from a ski resort that's trying to compete with the best mountains in the country. However, Powder Mountain's lift setup issues are counteracted by a lack of lift lines, even on peak days. The resort's cap on lift ticket sales genuinely works, and unless there's a mechanical issue with a lift, waits of any sort are incredibly rare. This means that on a weekend or holiday, Powder Mountain guests can get in substantially more laps than at other competing destinations, even with the slower speeds of its lifts. For the traveler that's locked into specific vacation times, this trait alone may all but make up for the resort's infrastructure deficiencies. If it snowed in the past few days and temperatures haven't varied wildly, Powder Mountain slopes are hard to beat. The low visitation means the resort holds snow exceptionally well, with fresh tracks readily available throughout most course season dates. Powder Mountain's glades are amazing. They're mainly lightly spaced aspen trees, making for easy navigation through the woods and holding the last vestiges of powder even when other areas have been skied out. Powder Mountain's Snowcat-reliant slopes take the powder retention benefits of the lift-served terrain and turn them up to the max. The terrain not directly served by lift holds its accumulation extraordinarily well, often only receiving a few tracks per week. If temperatures have been consistent since the last snowfall, a Snowcat ride means a journey to pristine, untouched powder. The big downside to Powder Mountain's Snowcat rides is the price. These cat experiences are not included with a lift ticket, and they go for upwards of $40 per ride with taxes and fees. However, if you don't want to pay for the ride, the cat-served terrain is available to skin or hike up as well. But while Powder Mountain's snow retention can stand out, the same isn't always true for its raw snow totals. The resort does regularly see over 300 inches of snow each year, but accumulation tends to lag behind that of the Utah Cottonwoods Mountains, which lead not just the state, but the continent in this category. Powder Mountain's lower elevation also hurts snow consistency, resulting in more variable conditions than competitors, particularly in lower mountain areas. While Powder Mountain did install its first snowmaking infrastructure this season, coverage is still extremely limited, so dry or warm spells can hit Powder hard, especially if it's earlier or later in the season. In below average snow years, major terrain zones at Powder Mountain may begin closing as early as mid-March, with the Lower Mountain Paradise area usually closing first. As a result, unlike most Colorado and Utah competitors, late March is not a reliable time to book a trip to Powder Mountain. Under its current setup, Powder Mountain scores highly in one category that several other resorts in the state struggle to do well in: family friendliness. The resort arguably has the best green terrain in Utah, with mellow groomers and even some beginner glades available across various lifts and elevations. The Hidden Lake Express, Village, and Mary's lifts are home to the largest and most unique concentrations of these beginner slopes, so those looking for easier terrain should be sure to check them all out. Some greens don't always get groomed, but this leaves an opportunity for those who have never dabbled in powder skiing before to give it a shot. And thanks to the sheer quantity of beginner runs, there are always more than enough groomers, even if a few of them aren't maintained. Powder Mountain also stands out for its intermediate terrain. The best blue cruisers can be found right off the Hidden Lake lift, with consistent grooming and beautiful panoramic views. Under the resort's current setup, Cobabe Canyon is home to numerous intermediate powder runs with direct lift service from the Mary's chair. With the exception of the Lower Mountain Paradise lift, every other chair at Powder serves a handful of both groomed and ungroomed blues. There's even a small section of intermediate bowl terrain off the Mary's lift, as well as some awesome moderately sloped glade terrain off the Mary's, Village, and Hidden Lake lifts. Powder Mountain offers a strong selection of steep, ungroomed terrain for advanced level visitors. Black Diamond runs include demanding tree-defined trails, glades of various densities, and some chutes. A considerable portion of Powder's harder terrain is snowcat or bus served, holding ample powder for days after storms. If conditions are good, experienced guests should be sure to check out the Paradise Lift, which boasts a wide array of below treeline challenges. With a bit of resort knowledge, guests can find perilous cliff drops and rockline chutes off some of these runs. Under the current resort setup, advanced and expert skiers and riders should also consider taking either the Lightning Ridge or Raintree Snowcats, which provide access to steep, untracked bowls and trees, or hitting the Upper Mountain Woodies World and Powder Country terrain zones, which end at a shuttle bus and also rarely get tracked. However, seasoned experts might come away a bit disappointed by Powder Mountain. Truly extreme terrain is hard to come by, and the only double Black Diamond runs at the resort are only accessible via snowcat and a small hike. Under the resort's current setup, lapping these lines is an absolute chore, with lift, bus, and snowcat rides all required to get back to where you started. Powder Mountain also has a few logistical quirks that may lead to some tricky situations. Each base area does have its own lodge with good quality, reasonably priced food and drink options, but there are no facilities in more remote and lower mountain areas. If you're coming from certain mountain zones, it takes a couple of lift rides to reach the nearest lodge. Under the current setup, this trek can take over 15 minutes, which is hugely inconvenient if you want to escape stormy conditions. It's also worth noting that while Powder Mountain is a fairly direct resort to get around, there are a few situations where it's easy to end up at the wrong lift if you aren't paying attention. Powder Mountain is one of the only resorts in Utah to offer night skiing, albeit on very limited terrain. Only the Sundown Quad Chair spins after 4 p.m., and as of early 2024, this lift takes a bus to reach from the main resort zone, but it is a solid place to get some evening laps in with a decent variety of terrain. In recent years, the night skiing ticket price has decreased to just $19, making the experience much more affordable. So that's the Powder Mountain experience as it currently stands, but for the 2024-25 season, the resort has a ton of changes in store. Let's start with the positives, and there are many. First off, the resort is installing a whopping 3 new publicly available lifts, including a high-speed replacement for the Paradise Quad, a fixed-grip quad replacement for the aging Timberline Triple, and another new fixed-grip quad to the top of Lightning Ridge, replacing the current Snowcat service there. In addition, Powder Mountain is tentatively planning to relocate the Lightning Ridge Snowcat service elsewhere within the vicinity of the resort, potentially opening up even more terrain for those willing to pay for a Snowcat ride. The new Paradise Express is expected to halve the ride time of Powder Mountain's second longest lift, making it much more desirable to spend time in this advanced-oriented area and a lot faster to leave it and get back to the nearest facilities. Upgrading the Timberline Triple to a fixed-grip quad likely won't change the ride speed by much, but replacing this 52-year-old lift should provide a significant increase in reliability for the years to come. Finally, we expect the new Raintree Quad to be the biggest game changer of these three lift investments, providing two important benefits. Number one, much easier access to the advanced and expert chutes on Lightning Ridge and James Peak, with the new lift service eliminating the need for guests to pay extra to ride a Snowcat. And number two, the resolution of a considerable missing lift link, with the new chair finally providing lift service from the main section of the resort to the beginner-oriented Sundown area. We won't know much about the replacement Snowcat route until next season, but it is possible that we'll see expanded access to a place that's currently reserved for guided tours only. In addition to the upgrades we just mentioned, Powder Mountain announced earlier today that a new lift is planned for the Wolf Canyon area for the 2025-26 season, bringing public access to over 1,000 acres in the Wolf Creek and DMI zones that are currently reserved for guided tours only. This new development has the potential to significantly increase Powder Mountain's appeal to advanced and expert skiers and riders, with new bowls, blades, and chutes across the expanded footprint. However, these upgrades will be counteracted by a few very controversial changes to resort access. Starting next season, the resort is set to limit access to the Village and Mary's lifts, which are currently available to all Powder Mountain ticket and pass holders, exclusively for the use of private homeowners. The resort is also building a new fixed-grip quad on the currently Snowcat-served Raintree footprint, which will also be reserved exclusively for those who own real estate on Powder Mountain's property. Regular guests will still be able to hike up the Raintree resort area, but the Snowcat service will be gone, and the new lift means that fresh tracks may be harder to come by. The changes are also expected to remove public access to the Hike Out Lefty's Canyon area, which sits directly below the Village lift. All in all, while the new Lightning Ridge lift is expected to bring direct lift service to over 430 acres of new terrain, closing off Village and Mary's will block off access to at least 650 lift-served acres, making for an over 200-acre reduction in the lift-served skiable footprint for the general public. Although this acreage discrepancy is expected to be quickly addressed by the massive Wolf Canyon expansion in 2025, paired with the 390 acres taken up by Lefty's Canyon and at least 220 acres included in Raintree, not everyone is going to view these new developments as a fair trade-off. Importantly, regular guests will be losing access to some of Utah's most diverse beginner and intermediate terrain off the Village and Mary's lifts, as well as some solid, rarely touched advanced level glades in Raintree. True experts may not be too disappointed by these developments, but they're sure to be a bummer for a great deal of long-term loyal guests. But no matter how much of the resort goes private, Powder Mountain remains a reasonably straightforward resort to get to. With no traffic, the mountain is about 75 minutes from downtown Salt Lake City. This is a longer travel time than the resorts in the Cottonwoods, but thanks to the lower visitation, traffic jams are considerably more rare, especially on weekends and holidays. As with many other Utah resorts, the access road can be subject to closures after serious snowfall. A number of private shuttle services exist between Powder Mountain and the Salt Lake City airport. If you do decide to drive, parking is free at all three base areas with no reservations required. If you want to stay on site at Powder Mountain, the resort offers a range of ski and ski out lodging options. There aren't any true hotels, but several condo rentals exist across the resort. Many condo complexes come with access to community activities, as well as amenities such as pools and hot tubs. All of these slopeside condo rentals exist at or near the Hidden Lake and Timberline base areas. The houses alongside Village and Mary's are home to private owners only, so there won't be a way to rent your way into these newly private terrain zones next year. Besides the limited night skiing, a day at Powder Mountain typically ends at 4 p.m., but there is a limited operate experience, with the Powder Keg Bar at Timberline Lodge serving drinks until 5 p.m. on weekdays and 7 p.m. on weekends. But past that, operate at Powder Mountain is non-existent, and you might want to go somewhere else if you value that. So at least as of this season, Powder Mountain is perhaps most akin to an industrial warehouse, a huge footprint but bare on the amenities. The resort delivers empty slopes, incredible snow preservation when it stays cold, and family-friendly terrain on a palatable footprint for those susceptible to altitude sickness. The resort does have its drawbacks, including its slow, incoherent lift network, limited on-mountain facilities, and less reliable early and late seasons. In addition, the resort's claimed 8,400-acre footprint is highly misleading, and most guests will only end up exploring a fraction of that terrain. For the upcoming 2024-25 season, Powder Mountain is planning to address a lot of its lift network issues, but it's also actively damaging the overall experience by taking away some public terrain. We are excited to see the 3 new public lifts and some incredible terrain expansions, but unless Powder Mountain reverses course on their decision to take Village and Mary's private, we worry about the direction that the new ownership is taking the resort and the overall vibe shift that will come with it. While it's always possible the resort will have a last-minute change of heart, your last chance to ski Powder Mountain in its full expanse will in all likelihood be within the next few weeks, before the lifts close for the season, and in some cases, to the public for the last time, on April 7th, 2024. One thing that's already changed about Powder Mountain is its lift ticket prices. While tickets used to be pretty reasonable for the experience, they have shot up substantially since the change in ownership, with the average one-day adult price increasing from $118 last year to $200 this year. This is a crazy amount of money to pay for any resort, let alone one that has slow lifts, limited facilities, and very little snowmaking. Powder Mountain is currently a 2-day partner on the Indy Pass, so if you want to go this year, using an Indy product is probably the best option for access. However, Powder is dropping from the Indy partnership when it goes semi-private next year, so it may be near impossible to access the resort at an affordable rate after this season ends. Now let's go through how Powder Mountain stacks up in our overall rankings, which are determined by the following 10 category mountain score. Powder Mountain sees competitive snow totals for the Rockies and excellent snow retention, although overall snow totals fall short of those in the Cottonwoods, and the resort gets a 9 for snow. Powder Mountain does stay reasonably reliable thanks to its natural location, but a lack of snowmaking and low base elevation can make for variable conditions, and the resort gets a 7 for resiliency. Powder Mountain claims an 8,464-acre footprint, but based on our measurements, only 5,200 of these acres are actually accessible with a lift ticket, getting the resort a score of 9 for size. With the move to a semi-private footprint, we expect the number of publicly available skiable acres to decrease to 4,160 acres next year, but increase back to 5,200 for 2025. Powder Mountain offers some of the best beginner and intermediate terrain in Utah, but expert offerings are a bit lacking, and the resort gets an 8 for terrain diversity. Powder Mountain does have some demanding chutes, glades, and bump runs if you know where to look, but most of its really difficult terrain currently requires riding a Snowcat or hiking to reach, and the resort gets a 6 for challenge. Powder Mountain currently has one high-speed quad, but all other lifts are slow. 44% of the resort's lift ticket access terrain requires hiking, taking a Snowcat, or riding a shuttle bus to reach, getting the resort a 2 in this category, although this is likely to improve following next year's changes. Powder Mountain's cap on ticket sales works, and significant crowds are almost non-existent, even during peak times, earning the resort our highest score of 10 for crowd flow. Powder Mountain has some decent base lodges and a few porta potties, but that's about it, and the resort gets a 3 for facilities. Powder Mountain has a mostly intuitive footprint, although it's hurt by some high consequence trail junctions if you go the wrong way, and the resort gets a 6 for navigation. And finally, mountain aesthetic. Powder Mountain's top-down setup means it doesn't have the same striking upper mountain feel as some competitors, but the empty slopes, expansive footprint, and undeveloped lower mountain areas do provide a unique vibe, and the resort gets a 7 in this category. These categories add up to an overall score of 67, placing Powder Mountain 6th in Utah and 36th overall in North America as of March 2024. Powder Mountain currently lags behind all other serious Utah destinations in terms of lifts and facilities, but it helps curb that deficit with top-notch crowd management, a solid size even with its misleading acreage claims, and very strong snow retention. We expect next year's changes to bring improvements to Powder Mountain's lifts and navigation as well. but with a significant chunk of unique beginner, intermediate, and advanced terrain going away, it remains to be seen whether Pall Mall will still be able to hold the same terrain diversity advantages it currently offers for lower ability mountain goers. Ultimately, Powder Mountain's overall competitiveness may or may not change much from an objective standpoint next year, but the subjective factor of removing terrain that was previously publicly available has the potential to hurt it a lot in the eyes of consumers. For more information on Powder Mountain and over 100 destination ski resorts, check out peakrankings.com. See you for the next one.